So yesterday I got hijacked on a plane. Well, not really, but I did go through a hijack experience, which was really, really, really interesting. So it's part of what's known as a disruptive passenger experience, or the hijack experience. And it's run by former military personnel, such as former special forces, whose job, amongst other things, was to save hostages from crises like that. So the day is split into two halves. The first part of the day, you experience it as someone who's being taken hostage. And in the second part of the day, you look through what types of, I'm hesitant to use the word defences, but what types of countermeasures could you take if you find yourself fighting for your life in an environment like a plane. And it's on the first part I'm going to pay most thought to in this video. So in the hijack experience, it's at an airport, in this instance Bournemouth Airport, and you go there and you check in. It feels like you're a bit like you're going on an actual holiday. And after a short kind of opening presentation, you're essentially onboarded onto what was a functioning plane. Now, in this particular plane, it was, I can't remember the type of plane, but it's a large passenger plane. Like if you've flown anywhere kind of European city to European city, you'll have gone in a plane of this kind of size, a Boeing plane. And it'd done 30 odd years of service. And what they've done is they've chopped off the back kind of fifth of the plane. So that's kind of capped off, but it's still in really good nick. It's still in a really good state. So you've got this large plane at the airport. You get loaded on. There's a lady that's been a air hostess and a trainer of air hostesses. She stands at the front. She takes you through the security. You sit down, you buckle up. So far, so good. And you're talking with fellow passengers. Now, in your briefing, you're told, you know from signing up on the course, that you are going to get essentially hijacked. But I thought what was quite interesting is they let the time elapse, so you didn't know at what point in that experience the hijackers were going to board the plane. So you find yourselves, as you're waiting, chatting, talking, making jokes, doing all that stuff for about 10, 15 minutes or so, until some sense of normality came into place. And it feels like you're on, a moving, functioning plane. Then suddenly hijackers burst into the scene. Now, what I thought was quite interesting, obviously, they come with loud bangs. They come with loud bangs, there is smoke, and the lights are dimmed in the plane. As that's happening, the hijackers, which are kind of balaclavaed up, they're armed in this instance with pistols and submachine guns. They've got, all the masks on, all the gear on, but they burst into the plane. What is quite interesting is that the first commands were heads down, heads down, heads down. It was very aggressive, it was very kinetic, it was very, very fast. So as they smash on heads down, and interestingly, because your head's down, you can't assess the scene. So one of the things you might have thought you'd have been able to do in these scenarios is assess, right, there are X amount of hijackers and they've got these types of weapons and they're in these types of areas. But just that first act of heads down, as soon as your head is down, you can see absolutely bugger all. And obviously one of the important parts of the experience is you don't attack the hijackers, because it's, they want to give you the experience of being hijacked. You can't be wrestling around on the floor with the instructors of the seminar that early in the day. So heads down, really kinetic, really fast, so you can't assess anything. The lights go dim and the area fills with a great degree of smoke, like dry ice, and there are noises being played throughout. So over the speakers, there's screaming, there's crying, there's kind of unstable plane noises, like turbulence noise. So turbulence, screams, shouts, all this sort of thing is playing over and over and over and over again. Before you go on there, your watches are stripped from you, your phones are stripped from you, so you've got no perception of time passing by. And what the hijackers do, essentially, they dominate the space really, really fast. So they've dominated that space really early doors. And one of the more interesting things is, once they've got space dominance, what would then move themselves to do is provide extra countermeasures to avoid any kind of counterattack from the people that have been taken hostage. So, for example, what they would do, and some of the things that I hadn't really expected them to do, were things like stacking passengers. So you might make a passenger lie down in the footwell, where your feet go when you're flying on a plane, have them lie down there. Then they might have other people, less able people, sat on you or have their legs over you. So instantly you take some of the more capable people and they're being sat on or encumbered by others. People were pretty rapidly zip tied up. So, and again, the zip ties, what was quite interesting is this was a proper job zip tying. So the hands were zip tied this way, as opposed to that way. This way, you can fight back a little bit, you can strike a little bit, you can do other stuff. This way, there's not a huge amount of things you can do. So instantly you feel so much more encumbered and zip-tied that way. And every kind of zip-tie defense you've been taught, bang, just doesn't really do the job. So you are zip-tied up. And obviously the more robust zip ties, they're very difficult to break. It's not what YouTube videos would have you believe. So they're really robust. You're always in a state of chaos. So you're never more than 4 or 5 minutes in any one position or state. So you're being screamed at, shouted at, you're being told not to look at the hijackers. The hijackers do not want to be looked at. So they want your eyes on the floor, they want your eyes in corners. They really take command of the space very well and take command of your mind and attention. And they're very aggressive on those that flout those rules or try and take a peek, which is really quite interesting. So dominating where you look, so you can never really assess the entire scene. You never really get the entire picture. So you get zip tied up. Some people had masks put on. Others, quite ingeniously, were told to put on, if you got a hoodie, put on the hoodie backwards, and they'd put the hoodie over the front of their face. So again, they're wrapped up that way. Other people had the sleeves of their hoodies tied together. So even without much equipment, you know, they were tied up, wrapped up, straight-jacketed by their own equipment. There are also some quite clever restraints with the chairs. So for example, if you imagine a normal kind of plain seat, you'd be told to put your knees in the footwell, put your face down on the seat where you'd put your bum, and then they'd put the plain belt over your back. So again, that's you tightened, ratcheted down with your back. And if you had a row to yourself, each of the armrests, you would ratchet the straps around both your arms. So you've got a strap around your back, strap around your arms, and you're facing the cushion of the chair. And then other people might sit on your back. They were very good at finding ways to kind of stack bodies on bodies. So putting you in stress positions. So you might be standing up with a chair to your chest, and then you might have to lean over and touch the chair in front. So you've got stretched stress positions. People were being asked to put their hands on the ceiling of the plane, or you know, the seats on either side. Or other people, once they were strapped up, you know, they were locked in their zip ties, they were told to put their arms around each other's heads. So again, it's about building people in shapes where for them to be able to counterattack is really difficult, because it's not like just getting off your chair and having it. Now you might have someone sat on your lap, you might have your arms over their head, you know, you've got a mask on. So all of the things that you think you might be able to do, through that experience you learn with the right experience of the hijackers, they make it very difficult for you to do without requiring much equipment. You know, burst in, be kinetic, control people's attention, and then start essentially pacifying the plane by putting people in shapes and structures and stress positions and encumbering them on top of each other, next to each other, you know, getting people to lie down next to each other and wrap their legs together. So everything is about making it as awkward as possible for you to spring into action, which I thought was really clever. And then also what they would do is plenty of noise disruption. So obviously what they would do, you got your blindfold on. Now, to simulate the act of the terrorists hitting people next to you, they'd have you wouldn't know this, but they'd have a focus mitt on, you're blindfolded, and they'll smack the seat next to you, where it makes an almighty clap that when you don't expect it, just, you know, puts the shits up you. They might lift up your mask or take your hoodie off for a second and shine bright lights in your eyes. Yeah, so again, you can very barely see. When your head's down, all you can really see are feet coming through the cockpit. And what they do really interestingly is the terrorists take the time swapping their shoes and some of their clothes in that experience. So it's very hard for you to know how many terrorists are on the plane at any one time. Because obviously one of the things you want to be thinking is how many bad guys are on the plane. And thought the experience was quite good at keeping you guessing how many bad guys were on the plane. You know, whilst they don't physically attack you in the experience, you're being pushed and pulled and manhandled. And that's really important. And they're also really insulting, which is really important. So they'll pick on you. They might pick on your size, your weight, your face, your ethnicity. All these things will get picked on, and kind of, you know, they would all be in character. So they'd find reasons to be angry at you, to be disgusted by you, which again just added to the impact. So, you know, people were constantly finding themselves being abused and shouted at, roughed up, stand up, sit down, sit on that person, lie on your face, turn your face, you know. They'd even do things to dehumanize you. So, for instance, they made a couple of blokes crawl through the middle aisle like there were dogs, and were being spoken to like there were dogs. What they would do is things like, ask if you're thirsty and then pour an entire bottle of water over your head, which is freezing cold on the plane. They'd even simulate like urinating on you. Obviously it'd be a bottle of scented water, but they'd go, all you would hear is them laughing about it and fake pissing on you, which all sounds a bit weird, but the overall effect is one of complete domination. So they take control of the space to make you feel powerless and disinclined to resist, because not only are you psychologically being battered by noise, by light, by sound, by smoke, you're also physically encumbered by other people sat on you, next to you. You might be, in the areas where you get on the plane, between the pilot's area and, the first row of seats, they might stack 3 or 4 people like little sausages in a row, smushed together, like they're, it's Willy Wonka's bed. So again, lining and stacking people, making people stacked in scenarios, or using the straps already on the plane, or using your clothing to encumber you, to tie you, is a really interesting way of taking the power out of that plane, power out of that group, really, really easily. And even though it was an experience, a lot of people were in genuine, gosh, I don't want to say genuine fear, but they were certainly adrenalised, because I had one chap and he was sat on my knee, and he would have been about early 30s, and he's shaking like a leaf. Now he obviously knows what he's getting in for, but his arms are shaking, his legs are shaking. Some of the stress positions are horrible. It makes you realise, when people talk about enhanced interrogation, stress positions fucking suck. So, and that was an interesting part of the experience, that by taking our attention, by taking command of the space and moving us around, dehumanizing us and messing with our senses, you don't realise how long it's going on. So the experience was about 3 hours of this hijack, from kind of bursting in to the kind of final phases. So there's lots of ways in which the terrorists took command of the space. How it resolves, so as the scene plays out, the audio that's always playing, bear in mind there's always people screaming and crying, baby noises, all that sort of stuff is playing out really loud. It then becomes apparent that the plane has landed, and that police are surrounding said plane, and sirens and so on. And then essentially a gun battle takes place between the terrorists and the police eventually win. But even when the police eventually win, the police are still really rough with you. They still shout at you, because from the police perspective, they have no idea if terrorists are hiding amongst the innocents in that crowd. So the police, again, are just as robust and as aggressive as the hijackers. They do not remove your blindfolds. They do not remove your restraints. And you get manhandled off the plane, and you kind of, in this instance, go down the slide, which was rather fun. And then you have to kneel down. And in that, the police are still being strong and authoritative and aggressive and checking your paperwork. And eventually you get kind of checked out and passed through that system. But it was quite interesting, because a lot of people reacted rather strangely. As soon as the police had started to liberate them, they started to react in a way that might have got them shot by the police, because they were too relieved too quickly. So it was quite interesting to see that as soon as people's perception of danger had passed, they were making unwise decisions. Remember, a lot of these police officers might be people, very late teens, very early 20s, not a lot of range time, not enough experience, scared, very scared. So you can easily imagine how people could lose their lives in these scenarios. So overall, it was really, really interesting. So some of my key takeaways from it are, A, training in a plane is awesome, because how often, think about plane terror attacks and also air rage. These things are only ever going to be on the rise. We're only going to ever fly more as a species. We're never going to fly less. So these type of incidents will always happen and may increasingly happen. And so having any opportunity to just move around the physical space of a plane and all the unique facets that come with it, really useful. Terror attacks, I was really not expecting the level of ingenious restraints, encumberments, how much they would control your vision and where you're looking, how much of a sensory onslaught it would be. So obviously you're trying to game the experience, because you are being hijacked. You feel like you're being hijacked, but you also want to have in your mind, okay, if this was real, what would I do? I want to have a look at my restraints, how I'm restrained. I want to try and gauge how many terrorists, what weapons they've got. And even though you don't take the chance to attack them in it, you want to be looking at them a little bit and be like, could I have you now? Could I get you? Could I get you in this experience? One of the hard things is because they control your lines of sight so well, and because they encumber you with people so well and use the strap so well, you know, some people will just never be able to have that opportunity, especially if you're a bigger bloke like me. I'm a first target to get tied up, wrapped up, because I'm probably likely to be one of the first people to respond. So, you know, them picking people that they're really going to encumber, you don't really expect that. You don't really expect not being able to see how many they are. And also, imagine they're walking up and down the central aisle of the plane. It's very difficult to tell, have all the terrorists gone past you? Is one in front and one behind? Is one that, you know, you don't really know where they are at any one time. And you don't want to take too much of an obvious sneak peek, because if you do, you're going to cop it. And obviously in the simulation, you get punished for it. But in real life, that could just be you dead. So again, you know, the risk for reward about taking that extra sneak peek could be the thing that allows you to take the chance, but it could also be the thing that kills you. What they were quite good is having people almost in simulated families. So you, with your family next to you, you might decide to make a move. Me making a move if my family's way at the back next to another terrorist, that might completely change my will to resist, my will to attack. Because if I make a scene up front, maybe people that I care about up back are going to really cop it and die. So again, some really interesting psychological dynamics going on there. But speed, violence of action, controlling the space, controlling the people, you know, from a terror perspective was really interesting. Use of restraints and encumberments was very, very interesting. And you as the person being hijacked, it's a lot more difficult for you to gauge the battle space, for want of a better phrase to say it. It's really hard for you to do in that chaos. It's really hard for you to know how many bad guys with what weapons and what opportunities could I take. And I have to tell you that, you know, as a person that studies and looks at this stuff a lot, the opportunities to resist are few and far between, because there is always something to prevent you. So, for example, you might have a terrorist behind you and in front of you. And yes, you might be able to deal with one in front of you if he's armed, or even if he's armed, but it's going to be very difficult for you to work in that space. And obviously planes are difficult environments to move kinetically around anyway. So once you're sat down, someone's sat on you, your arms are interlinked, you are wrapped up, you are blindfolded, you've got water all over your face and you're tired, you know, you can imagine how quickly your window of opportunity goes away. So I would say that one of the main things is it only ever gets worse. You only ever get more powerless to a certain degree. And obviously there's a point of diminishing returns where also the terrorists will find themselves facing fatigue, mental and physical fatigue, and there might be opportunities. But I would say, you know, very much in the early, when people burst onto the scene in that terror incident, that's your chance. Because if you give them 2 minutes, 3 minutes, that entire plane was pretty much under authoritarian control straight away. So it's either act first, or you might be waiting a long time for your opportunity to act, and people's ability to act will be much less potent. So I'd say that's a kind of a key takeaway. You can either respond really, really early in the experience. Obviously you don't for this one, but in real life, you either respond really, really early, or you could be waiting a good amount of time. And a lot of plane hijacks have taken an awfully long time, you know, weeks, you know, several weeks. Some hijacks have taken over, you know, so some can take quite a long time. Just 3 hours, you know, and this is a grounded plane, and suddenly it gets very hot and it's very sweaty and it smells bad, you know, just all these scared people on a plane in stress positions. It smells awful after just 3 hours. You can only imagine what 30, 40 hours could look like and smell like, you know, but there's no airflow coming through the plane, especially if it's been grounded. So you can see all those factors creeping in as well. The kind of heat, stress, fatigue, smell. It's a very visceral thing. So that was quite interesting too. I would really, really recommend having gone through and to go through that experience, if nothing else, because it gives you a better understanding. When you watch a film, you're like, ah, that's when I'd attack, you know. Or even sometimes when you get on a, if you're a bit of a nutter like me, when you get on a normal plane and you go on holiday, you're like, if something happened, watch that. You know, this is what I would do. It's very different in the real scenario, with the noise, with the smoke, with the lights, with the fear, with the other people, with the encumbrances, with the tactical knowledge that the terrorists had. You know, it really takes away a lot of your weapons of opportunity, and it takes away a lot of your ability to see the battle space and make a plan. So really, really recommend it. Second half of the day was, you know, a bit more open up to techniques. So it's a bit like anything from drunk, disruptive passenger all the way through to, you know, terrorist takeover. So again, it's a scalable event, because for most people, aggression on a plane is going to be no more than probably some loud drunken American gobbing off because he can't have his preferred cake or something like that. It's going to be something to that effect. But again, air rage happens all the time, and most people that work on airplanes, to be honest, are slight. They're very often women. They're very often skinny. They're not the most physically robust people in the world. So it's interesting to look at scenarios where you might need to assist those people in restraining, controlling, or escalating, physically having to go beyond those areas with disruptive passengers. And bear in mind that very few people travel alone. So you might have a stag do, coming back from Magaluf, absolutely shit-faced. That all starts to go a bit wrong. Suddenly that's a lot of angry humans in a space that's not designed for angry humans. How do you go about controlling that, monitoring that, because it is very, very difficult in those spaces. So the hijack experience was phenomenal. Having the ability to just move around in a combative sense in a plane space was really, really useful, because you get used to things you can and can't do, and the variables change depending on where the threats are. Sat left, sat right, standing up while you're sat, you're standing while they're sat. There's lots of different variables in that already. So moving through people and space and time in a moving object where there are other unpredictable humans, that's all really interesting food for thought. So if you get a chance to train on a plane or a train simulator or something to that effect, really do it. And if you get the chance to go through the hijack experience, I believe they do them once a year for this particular franchise that I did it with, absolutely take them up on it, because it's a really unique insight into the things you thought you would do, and actually when you go through it, what options are available to you. And it really is a great mind exercise to go, I could do it then, but now for the next 2 hours, I've got no chance of being able to pull something off. And I might have been taken out and shot in those 2 hours. So it lets you know windows of opportunity. You start to get a feel for that and how seldom they are. So that's a little bit about me and the hijack experience. Did that with the lovely Claire and Jess from Amazonia Krav Maga, a couple of friends, but it was a disruptive passenger hijack experience. So they put on this for lots of different martial artists, combatives, people that work in the airline industry. It was really, really realistic. An auditory onslaught, a visual onslaught, a physical onslaught, but well worth having a pop at just to get a feel for that experience. So go out there, give it a go.